is so insane.
Funko, Funko, oh, 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 Funko, Funko, oh, oh, oh. I got married to a Funko Pop. Whoa. We got wedded, conjoined in a Subway shop. Whoa. I'm married to my Funko Pop. Whoa. We got joined, coitus in a Subway shop. Whoa. Vitamins and biscuits and minerals, they come to me through a tube. My whole life is spent watching on a tube. Whoa-oh. Whoa-oh, oh, oh, whoa. I'm married to a Funko Pop. Whoa. We got wedded, we got joined in a Subway shop. Whoa. Vitamins and minerals, they come to me through a tube. Vitamins and minerals, they come from me through this here tube. Whoa. Funko, Funko, I got married to my Funko Pop. Whoa. We got wedded, we got joined in a Subway shop. Whoa. Love at first sight, love at first sight. What shall I do with love at first sight? Put it in my hand, throw it on the ground. Who knows? Just what will I do?
We got wedded, conjoined in a Subway shop. Whoa.
The human guinea pig stuff in Africa is so insane. The human guinea pig stuff in Africa is so insane. Is so insane. Is so insane. Is so insane.
welcome. It's another deep literary analysis, which means that we only have the highest IQ people with us. We drop about 1,500 viewers when we do literary analysis, down to a couple hundred, which tells me that, nobody reads books, nobody cares, nobody wants to be educated. Everyone wants the semblance of education through the internet. The idea that you can not actually read or not actually spend time in these topics, in these works, to actually educate yourself, but you can simulate education with internet simulations. I don't know. But I mean, I guess if we're going to have simulant spouses, why not have simulant education, right? So welcome all of my inner high IQ core audience tonight. People who actually care about literature, because guess what? You won't know what's actually going on in the world if you do not educate yourself in terms of lit. Did you know that literature has the power of predictive programming? We wrote 2 books on that because movies are also books. They're also written. They're screenplays. So you don't have a movie without a book first, or some form of dialogue, right? And today we're going to be analyzing and going into a lot of depth in the first half of the first, or I guess we should say the most important famous spy novel in modern literature. Apparently there was one spy novel 1 year before this, which makes it the earliest, but nobody has read it. It's really obscure. I don't remember the name of it. Something weird like, let me see if I can find it. What was it? My question to Grok is already gone. So it was something obscure. Hey, Jamie, could you make me another coffee? This one's pretty weak. And just pack in there a bunch more of that black dust that makes the espresso, whatever that's called. Oh, coffee. Can you put some more of that black dust in there? Inside that little machine. Pack some more black dust in there. You hear me?
Yep.
Hell, throw a little bit of damn brown in there. Remember that?
Yep.
Nick Cage with the brown. Remember that? That's when you snort heroin and gunpowder. Put a little bit of that in that espresso. Anyway, I thought it was kind of odd that we haven't covered like the first spy novel. And it has been made into a 3-part movie TV series, which is good. It's well done. You gotta have your Toby Jones. You can't have a British production without Benedict Cumberbatch and Toby Jones. They're in every British thing ever. So we'll be talking a little bit about the TV version, which was made by Acorn TV. I don't know what that is, but I thought it was like a BBC. It looks like a BBC thing. So now Conrad, I don't think Conrad had any experience in intelligence. He might have had some connection with it though, because he was a Navy man. And so like our previous character, our previous author, William Golding, who did Lord of the Flies, Conrad was also a British Navy man. And it says he spent time in charge of merchant ships in the Orient and in the Congo. Now, I had started last week Heart of Darkness, and that's supposed to be, one of the most important classic novels, much like this. I'm sorry, that book was super boring. I'm like a third of the way into it, and it's putting me to sleep every time I try to get into it. This one is good. So I skipped Heart of Darkness. Maybe we'll return to that if I can figure out how to snort some brown and wake up. But this one, again, and of course this is way more relevant for our channel because, as you know, we cover things that relate to predictive programming, geopolitics, conspiracies. And another thing that came to mind was, as I was reading this, he dedicates his book, oddly enough, to H.G. Wells. Now, he doesn't seem to have any commitment to socialism, capitalism, or any of these positions. So, interestingly, he's not some sort of partisan. And as we delve into the depth of this novel, we're going to notice that this is in many ways really a dark satire. There's not actually some sort of solution that's presented. Oh, I want to convince you all through my novel to believe in my pet political. No, he doesn't even really care. He just kind of thinks it's all absurd. It's almost absurdist. It's a dark, satirical, conspiratorial espionage work. And I dare say it's, after James Fenimore Cooper's, it's like the most famous and earliest of the genre of spy fiction. And it kind of kicks off British spy fiction. So you wouldn't have Le Carré and you wouldn't have these characters, John Buchan's novels, without this. And there's a cast of characters that are going to be very insightful. You're going to notice, I think all really good novels have the ability to penetrate the human psyche, human psychology, to a level that really only a novel can do. And that's why I think to be truly educated, if you don't know literature, you're not educated. Like, you're just not. I mean, you have to know this domain, or you're not educated. Sorry. It also deals with the early phases of Marxism and socialism, when there was still seen to be this linkage between the Marxists and the anarchists. And if you know the history of Marxism, you'll know that that linkage didn't last too long. Eventually, they part ways, and they really become bitter enemies. So, but the novel is written in 1904, and so Conrad, obviously living most of his life throughout the later 1800s, saw the rise and development of Marxism, so he made Marxism a key component of the novel. Although it's not strictly speaking classical Marxists that he's concerned with, it's the anarchists, the utopian anarchists, who are at this time in many ways comrades with the so-called proletariat, the so-called Marxist, socialist, red groups. And in fact, this novel will have a secret society. Now, they're a gaggle of goofballs. This is certainly not some sort of really powerful and effectual secret society. In fact, again, this is sort of the comedic element. The secret society of this novel, The Future of the Proletariat, is actually kind of a gaggle of a motley crew of goofballs and goobers. And so, let's see, I wanted to pull up another thing before we get into the history of the novel to the novel itself is this is prior to World War I. Thank you. And this novel is also 100 years before the War on Terror, or to quote George W. Bush, terror, right? The War on Terror, the mustard gases, and the War on Terror. The War on Terror. This is like 100 years before that. And guess what? The novel is focused all around. Terror. Yes, that's right. This book kicks off in 1904 the notion of a war on, or a terror campaign. What's up? Welcome, everybody. Shout out to the mods. Glad to see you guys here. And again, this is the provenance of British intelligence. It's almost like the British intelligence operatives in insiders, and we're going to say, although Conrad isn't necessarily a British intelligence operative, he seems to know how these things work, right? Because not only does he situate this terror within a secret society, he also has it as a giant, you got it, fake flag operation. Yes, that's right. The entire novel, the most famous spy novel of the early spy novels. I would say this one is more famous than James Fenimore Cooper's novel. Conrad's The Secret Agent, which kicks off British spy fiction, is about a fake flag. So think how stupid it is for so-called educated people who presumably read a lot, presumably they know the classics, and even if they don't study geopolitics, well, wait a minute, did you not read Conrad's Secret Agent? Because had anyone read Conrad's Secret Agent, they would know what a fake flag is. Because the whole damn plot's about a fake flag. Do you understand what I'm saying? The whole society is a bunch of idiots. We live amongst a sea of idiots. And Osho was right. The people are retarded. Now, this is 10 years before Lusitania. And the Lusitania, as many of you know, was presumably, it seems to be, a fake flag event as well. Its sinking was actually a propaganda event to get the U.S. involved in World War I. Isn't that interesting? Because although this novel is not about Lusitania or necessarily World War I, guess who the book is dedicated to? Does anybody know? This is wild stuff. By the way, who else is actually live streaming on these kinds of stuff? Does anybody else talk about this kind of stuff? Nobody else is going to teach you this kind of stuff. Let's go see what Hawk Tua is talking about. Oh yeah, that's where it's at right there. Yeah, that is where the brains are. That's the culture driver right there. Hawk Tua girl. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, we've got 238 people who actually have an IQ. If you would hit like and share. We got 244 people and only 80 of you like this stream. Come on. Now, famously, obviously, the sinking of the Lusitania is a fake flag event. But again, I'm calling attention to the fact that it is the secret society fake flag event in this novel that leads to a purported restriction on liberties and a crackdown on criticism of the establishment. That's the point of this novel, or one of the points, I should say. And the novel is dedicated to H.G. Wells. That's the crazy part. Now, again, I couldn't find any evidence of Conrad himself being in any way involved in, like, politics, or that he really cared about. He wasn't a socialist or anything like that. But if you go back to the 1918 poster, now these were posters, if I recall, they were designed by H.G. Wells. This one right here, the Hun. Do you see this beat back the Hun with Liberty Bonds? If I recall, I remember reading somewhere that H.G. Wells designed propaganda art and posters. And I think he did these. Halt the Hun. This right here. And this was intended to prep and, get people ready for World War I. And by the way, the fact that says the U.S. doesn't matter, because it's the same structure essentially running the propaganda behind World War I in the East and the West, in America and in the UK, and that is Wellington House. If you don't remember that, remember our Tavistock lectures that we did? Wellington House was the predecessor to Tavistock. Wellington House is the name for Britain's World War I propaganda bureau. It is named for Wellington House on Buckingham Gate in London, which was headquarters of the National Insurance Commission before the war. Then it becomes under the supervision of the Foreign Office. And then we get all these characters. David Lloyd George, the Fabian Socialist Prime Minister, and a bunch of these characters involved in 25 British authors were brought into Wellington House to promote World War I propaganda. Now, I don't see Conrad on that list, but he might be amongst these, because you notice H.G. Wells is there. Rudyard Kipling was invited. He wasn't able to attend. Conan Doyle was there. Chesterton, interestingly, Chesterton was there. So even Chesterton was involved in some of this. And so what they did was they really... by the way, here's John Buchan, right? British intelligence writer John Buchan is part of this propaganda campaign. So you notice that before anything's going on in America in regard to World War I, you've got the British structure churning out propaganda, and H.G. Wells was one of these key characters to mastermind propaganda at that time, including drawing up posters of the Hun, right? The mysterious, far-off Asian, East Asian, Eurasian, even Russian villains. German, all of it. They're all right, part of the same bad guy, demonized clump of people. The report on alleged German outrages. Remember, this was completely fabricated. We covered this when we went into a lot of depth. This was the Bryce Committee, James Bryce, the German outrages. This was all made up. But it was another way to utilize, and this says this is famously cited in the history of propaganda and psychological warfare. So you understand, this isn't conspiracy theory. This is mainline history and mainline research if you study propaganda and psychological warfare. Now, why do I say all that? All of that is to set the stage for Conrad's role in basically doing the same type of stuff. Because in this novel, we are never exactly told who the villain is. It is said to be a plot hatched via a foreign embassy in London. And this foreign embassy apparently has some connection to Crimea, Eurasia, Russia, Germany, Tartars. It's just sort of ambiguously all over the place. One of the characters who was formerly the handler to our main character, our protagonist, Mr. Verlock, is Baron, what's his name? Vertenhon Streit or something like that. Well, that sounds kind of German. Baron von Strautenheim, whatever. But then it says at one point, one of the British the Secretary of Defense says, "Oh, these dastardly, what does he call them? Crimean Tartars." Now we're gonna get all the Tartaria people. Oh, it's about Tartaria. Joseph Conrad was putting in secrets about Tartaria. No, it's just talking about the region over there of Tartaria. And the Tartars, the Tartar people. And so there's this reference to this region in the novel as somewhere being somehow the source of the unknown villains. So perhaps part of the reason that Conrad did that was that it was enough of a vague sort of empty space that you could later fit into the open space, whichever villains you wanted. Or perhaps because he dedicated the novel to H.G. Wells, he knew that H.G. Wells was beginning, perhaps even at this stage, even this early, to begin working towards a first Great World War. Because remember, world wars especially are planned years in advance. We know that because World War II was specifically mentioned in great detail in H.G. Wells's The Shape of Things to Come. So once again, British intelligence working overtime. And I always forget the exact date, but Wells's book is about, what, 4 or 5 years before World War II? Yeah, okay. So 1933. And the book describes this great coming World War as one where there's WMDs, there are planes and giant bombers dropping things from the sky. By the way, they have giant Masonic square and compasses on them, so he's pointing towards large scale, even post World War II bombs being dropped. Did you know that H.G. Wells wrote the first novel about the nuke or whatever? I think that's mentioned in Atomics, right? That's mentioned in Time Machine, because when they go to the future, they go to a future post-apocalyptic, post-nuke, post-atomic Britain at one point in Time Machine. Anyway, so this novel is a future establishment of essentially the socialist technocratic world state. Wells famously hated, of course, the Catholic Church just because he hated Christianity, and that was the largest branch, so-called. Eventually, the entire Roman system, they get gassed. So they get gassed from above to be destroyed. Of course, none of that would be necessary now that you have Pope Frank, who essentially pushes all the very things that H.G. Wells always wanted. So why get rid of the papacy when you can use the papacy? It's more that Alta Vendita model of how to use the papacy rather than to try to destroy it. So my point is then that it would seem to be the case that perhaps the precision of ambiguity, precise weaponized ambiguity in who the villain is in this novel, ultimately, is left blank precisely so that it could be used to be filled in at a later date with the Hun. And I'll see, what is exactly the definition of a Hun? I mean, is that just anybody from Central Asia? Nomadic people from Central Asia, Caucasus. I don't know I wonder why H.G. Wells came up with that. I guess he just thought it would be some sort of menacing sort of look for World War I or something. You don't really see like war posters. Imagine like when I think of posters, I think of, Bob Marley posters and Blacklight posters, right? Depeche Mode poster that I had. But like if you're growing up in the 1930s, you're gonna get a sweet Attila the Hun poster, right? I wish I could find the one that was supposedly designed by H.G. Wells, but anyway, I want to H.G. Wells. Oh, this is it. It might be the one with the gorilla. Yeah, I think because H.G. Wells did it with like he made them look like monsters or whatever, right? And it might be this one. Oh, look at these Eurasian people. They're monsters, right? Well, wait a minute. I thought H.G. Wells was like a liberal socialist. No, these people aren't consistent. So, all right. Now, that's all I think that's necessary for the background of the novel. I think that's my theory as to why it could be a mix of Baron von Strautenheim, who is also connected to people that speak Russian and Cyrillic, and people that are Tartars from the region of Crimea. And I think there's even at one point a reference to something Asian, right? So maybe even like Chinese agents or something. Like it's all over the place in terms of who this villain is. And that's, again, a really important technique, I'm stressing this is the whole point, in British imperial propaganda so that it could be utilized for any possible enemy or opponent. And that's a technique that the British continue to use for many years afterwards. Very effective, I guess you could say. And they're really precise and efficient at doing this through literature. I can't think of, I mean, nobody else really does this, like really perfecting propaganda through literature. I mean, you can go back to, I mean, Virgil's Aeneid, that's kind of a literary propaganda for the Roman Empire. Edmund Spenser's Faerie Queene was supposed to be the Virgil's Aeneid for Elizabeth's, UK. So certainly fiction has had a long history in being a tool of propaganda for the state. But when we're getting up into this period, there's really, you don't find novels prior to this functioning in this way. At least with this new type of style, this sort of, I guess, easily readable, brief. It's a new thing, right? And it's right around the same time as Conan Doyle, who you saw was part of the Wellington House propaganda outfit, because Conan Doyle was doing the same type of stuff with introducing everybody to detective fiction. And so detective fiction and spy fiction, they kind of emerge around the same time. And yes, to be fair, there was the earlier spy. The first spy novel is, what the heck is this? Google. I just want normal Google. James Fenimore Cooper. He's an American writer. I have to say I've never read James Fenimore Cooper. So the first modern spy novel is the 1821 James Fenimore Cooper novel called The Spy. Published in 1821, and it dealt with a spy plot during the American Revolution. And he was an American writer, right? Yes. American writer of the first half of the 19th century. Now, that may have propaganda in it. I've never read it, so I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised. But again, the British really perfect this. They're just really good at it. Because they actually make good books, right? It's not like, a lot of today's propaganda is so just garbage because it's basically all just woke, right? It's like that's the only thing that matters. The story, the plot, the acting, everything is secondary to the propaganda of the woke. And so that's largely why everything's just pure garbage, because it's all just brainwashing. But at least the propaganda and the brainwashing of 1904 was readable and revelatory, right? And had complex characters, complex motivations, complex moral questions. So, but again, keep in mind, the other element that is really kind of next level here, and perhaps this novel influenced the War on Terror, which is essentially actually a state-funded and a deep state controlled war on the psyche of the public. So the War on Terror, at least in my analysis, is not really about eradicating this amorphous unknown thing that could never actually be eradicated. It's actually a psychological warfare attack on the public that serves multiple uses, including the removal of civil liberties for more of a technocratic control grid, more of an excuse for total information awareness, surveillance, etc., etc., etc. That's really the meaning of the War on Terror, and it serves other Middle Eastern interests. Obviously, everybody probably can figure that out. But isn't this the same thing, though? People are asking questions about this. Like, I don't follow this stupid conspiracy theory, but isn't it the same rough generic region? Yeah, Central Asia, Tartary. Let's see, what's the phrase? There's a funny phrase that the Secretary of Defense in the novel uses. Let me see if I can find what it was. He calls them Crim Tartary. He says, which is Crimea, right? At one point, the British Prime Minister in the novel, when he's inquiring about this Terror event, he calls it the dastardly actions of Crim Tartary. And so he's talking about this rough region here, I suppose, of Crimea, the Crimean Khanate at one point, Crimean Tartar. So, but I think that the people's conspiracy theories about this come from this region and this terminology, and just people having basically no knowledge of this region. So, but this novel has nothing to do with the stupid conspiracy theory on the internet. All right, so I'm getting distracted here by all this information. Let's get back to the focus here. So we're also almost 100 years prior to the War on Tea. So keep that in mind. And perhaps the architects of the War on Tea, the various neoconservatives and PNAC individuals, and perhaps they had read this novel and they thought, oh, this is actually a good idea, right? Let's just use this old British revelatory idea here, because the novel tells us very clearly that this fake flag event will successfully restrict, perhaps, liberties and so forth. A little bit of setting, too, which gives us an idea of what's going on with with this stupid secret society of goofballs. So prior to later phases of Marxism, you have the First International. And at the First International, which is the sort of first phase of the gathering of Marxists, you had anarchists there as well. So there was proper Marxists and anarchists. And eventually, this union doesn't last very long. The First International. So let's take a look at that real quick, because that's the setting for our idiot secret society in the novel, who are quite funny in their dreams of a united utopian world where they overthrow all rule and all law and order. That's not what I'm looking for. Let's just find the regular. No. I just want a statement about the First International. Here we go. September 1864, according to Marxist.org or whatever, the International Working Men's Association was born. The First International was a proletariat organization that paved the way for the growth of the working class to organize and spread Marxism. In its day, the ruling class trembled before this menace. Yeah, right. They're the ones that were funding it. As its name implies, it was the first time an international organization had gotten together. Capitalism as a global system based on the division of labor and a market was worried, trembling, scared. Yeah, so there's the First International. It was a 150-year anniversary back in 2014. And at that first international, I believe Bakunin and Marx were buddies. So they were cool at that time. However, eventually, because the anarchists had this tendency to think that the solution to the awakening of the masses and the awakening of the proletariat was to begin with the individual's liberation. That was their starting point. Then they thought that after the individual awoke to freedom and liberty, and that he was not bound by anything other than the constraints that society has made up, then they could overthrow all law, order, police, whatever, right? Church and state, etc. It all goes away because it's all, quote, bourgeoisie. But then Marx says, hey, wait a minute. You'll never have the awakening of the individual without the awakening of class consciousness. So the entire proletariat has to awaken for the individual to awaken. So they have, you see how they have opposite dialectical starting points? So the anarchist says begin with the individual, overthrow all law and order. Marx says, no, you begin with a class that will lead to the individual awakening, and then they can overthrow to establish a new order. So they begin with the same positions of critique. Proudhon is the one who writes the critique of the society that's going on at his day that then sparks Marx. Marx got the sparks from Proudhon to write a critique of Proudhon. And he says anarchism, although it has some good points about critiquing the structure, its solutions are actually just petty bourgeoisie solutions. And he says they're the most unstable of the society. And so he says that they have to be rejected because in order for the revolution to succeed, you will need the state. So you can see how obviously the Marxists and the anarchists, although originally BFFs, they obviously part ways. And so this novel, however, situates a group of anarchists in a revolutionary secret society who are still in some ways very influenced by Marx. They're called amorphously something like the Red Committee or the Committee for the Revolutionary Brigades of the Red, or something stupid like that, right? And so our main character is this guy named Verlock, and Mr. Verlock, we find out, was at one time involved in the employ of some government, and he did something which he thought would impress this lady. So he was trying to mack on this chick, and he's like, watch me steal some documents from, I think, the French embassy. Or so he stole some embassy document or some military document, and he gets arrested. And so from this point on, this leads him to him being, this is many years ago, incarcerated somewhere. And then when he leaves this prison, he ends up in the employ of a foreign government, which is presumably either the Russian or the German embassy. It's not exactly ever made clear in the novel, as an agent provocateur, as a spy, as an informant. And so he is an embassy spy. And he doesn't really like this job, but he is sort of forced into it because of his past misdeeds, trying to impress this woman, who, by the way, the woman is the one that stabbed him in the back. And so that's foreshadowing, because we're going to realize that as a tragic comedic character, Mr. Verlock never learns his lesson. That should have taught him long ago this hard lesson about how to operate in the world and what to expect from such misdeeds. And yet Mr. Verlock will not learn that lesson. And so as we begin the novel, he is a shopkeeper, again, in the employ of the foreign embassy as a spy. No one knows this except himself, and we later find out the local chief inspector, who is aware of this, but tolerates it for various reasons, as we'll see. And yet, not only does he live this secret life with the embassy as a spy, with a handler there, he also lives a secret life as a member of the Future of the Proletariat, the FP, which is his secret society. He's a very important member in this group of this gaggle of idiots who believes that they're going to, through their revolutionary actions, overthrow the existing governments, all law and order, and they will institute their so-called utopia. This group is made up of a cast of oddballs, miscreants, idiots, a couple academics, and people who are, and I thought this was the most perhaps penetrating, accurate, prescient element of this group, is that they resent society because they are freaks and failures. So he has accurately portrayed the miscreant Antifa style group of people, you could say, who make up this revolutionary so-called utopian anarchist movement. They're also kind of quasi-Marxist too, oddly enough. They're miscreants and they're losers. So this is not at all what we think of as a spy novel, right? This is not Jason Bourne. This is not James Bond. Much closer to Le Carré or something like that, with Smiley in the sort of, I mean, Smiley isn't necessarily, he's a flawed, boring character, I guess you could say, but he's not like totally, malicious isn't the right word. I'm trying to think what the right word is for Verlock. He is a tragic, ultimately not a good guy. He's not wholly evil, though, right? So, I mean, if we had like a spectrum from role-playing games, right, he's not like chaotic evil. There is a chaotic evil character. That will be the Professor, who is an amazing... Actually, he's a very memorable character because if you've ever had academic professors who believe wholeheartedly in some ridiculous ideology and they're committed to it, whether it's Marxism or whatever. I mean, this is like the Professor. I mean, he's a perfect embodiment of that, and he's a very important member of the revolutionary secret society in the novel because he believes that he will be the one to really spark off the revolution because he's the BOMB maker, and the BOMB plays a very important role in the novel for a massive TERROR event, which we'll get to here in a moment. But back to Mr. Verlock, our protagonist, our tragic character. Verlock owns a shop of bric-a-brac. What kind of bric-a-brac, you say? Well, he sells nude Victorian bums. Yes. Prawn at this time consisted of occasional photos of Victorian ladies' bums. So he sells whatever contraceptives were available at this time and Victorian lady bum pictures and other knickknacks. So it's kind of like a head shop or a prawn shop, I guess, for 1904 in England, whatever they had in London. So he runs this kind of shady, it's like there's a million of these kind of like he would have Kratom. So he would have a sign for vapes and Kratom at his shop. You know what I mean? There's a million of those in Florida everywhere, but obviously that doesn't make much money, right? And he lives above this shop with his wife, who is much younger and obviously much more attractive than him, and he somehow finagled her into marrying him through a promise of taking care of his wife Winnie's mom and her brother, who is a slow boy. This is very important. Winnie's brother, Mr. Verlock's wife, is a slow boy. He's a beautiful slow boy. But he's going to play a very important role in the story. Can you guess what role a beautiful slow boy will play in a fake flag TERROR event? Can anyone guess? I'm going to let the chat. I'm going to let the chat. Chat, get it? Chat. I'm going to let the chat guess what role Stevie Nicks. Stevie does have sticks, by the way, in the novel. Which are from Stevie Sticks. Stevie Nicks. Fleetwood Smack. Yes. Patsy, good job. You guys know your... Exactly. Now, as I read this novel, I started thinking, isn't this the skit that Charles from MDE did? Bomb strap vest guy? I was like, was he reading this? Is that where Charles got this idea for? And because he was thinking of the professor in the novel. Because, get this, the professor is always strapped with, you got it, a BOMB. This is his protection against the police and the police chief, who are terrified to ever go near him because he's always strapped with a jacket. I mean, he dresses basically like a perv man who like flashes everybody, but instead of opening up that jacket and you seeing a ding dong or him opening up the jacket with a bunch of watches, he opens it up and he's got like some kind of weird bomb in there, right? What was that Charles skit from MDE? Bomb strap? Bomb vest? Bomb strap. Didn't he have like a bomb strap to him or something? Yeah. Is that taken off of YouTube? I don't know. We named his channel that. This is it right here. Charles Bombstrap. Let's see.
Before we signed a deal, Charles would always talk about the way he would get his movie made by kidnapping a Sony executive's daughter, strapping her to his chest with C4 and crashing a board meeting. We got this deal, so now we don't have to kill anyone, so here's the acted version.
Gentlemen, thank you for coming today to our annual board meeting. As we all know, we've had the worst time this past year our industry's had in many years. Do we have any good ideas this year, guys?
George, you know, 3 words. Leggy, blonde, super blonde.
No. 3 words for next year's business plan. Sequel, and sequel.
I think we need some young blonde board members.
Yeah,
Maybe that's the problem, is us.
What's wrong with a Western?
No, here it is. I got it right here. Superheroes is the thing, right? Now, what we're going to do is take the Aflac duck and the Geico gecko. And then you have Super Dad.
Remember me? Katie! Get down!
My daughter.
No, it's my daughter now, Sonny. Take a seat.
Yeah, so there's Bombstrap, and that's basically the professor from The Secret Agent. He is chaotic evil. He's completely psychopathic. All he wants is to make something go pop, pop, right? And what he makes go pop, pop is tragic, dark, comedic horror of the highest order, as we'll see. Now, let's see. We talked about secret society. We talked about all of that. We talked about the Marxists. Okay, so as we get into the novel, now the professor, by the way, was at one time an eminent academic professor of chemistry, and he decided that when he was not able to become wealthy, he had this desire to become rich. He wanted to make it. Something happened in his life which prevented that. He loses his academic position. He's not able to make any money. And so he becomes a poor, resentful revolutionary. And he falls amongst a bunch of other rejects who then want to blow up the society. And as you can see, he has dedicated his novel to H.G. Wells. So that again gives it, I would say, an air of officialdom, because he's working with people who are some of the most important planners, social engineers of the last century. As I said, Mr. Verlock's shop does not make much money. It's a bric-a-brac shop, and he sells images of the dancing girls. That's why I put the image. I couldn't think of a good image to put up, so I put the picture of Scarlett Johansson from The Prestige, because she's essentially dressed like the same era. And he's got a Winnie's mother, who's his wife, right? And then we got the slow boy. The mother is a woman who's got Beatus legs, basically. She can't walk, and she's going crazy. So Verlock is not exactly happy with this situation at home, and he's got to tend to this slow boy. He's really annoyed by the slow boy. He tolerates him because he got basically this good-looking woman way out of his league. She was actually in love with a butcher, a young butcher, but she decided for the sake of her mom and her slow boy brother to marry Mr. Verlock. But no one knows, except for the police chief, Mr. Verlock's secret lives. And he leads actually a triple life. In the public, he's a somewhat respectable but shady businessman. On another level, he's in the employ of a foreign government as an agent provocateur and a spy. But the novel begins with him being called to the embassy. We're also told, by the way, that he has a form of moral nihilism about him, and that he's lazy. So we're going to notice that his downfall will kind of result from a combination of the moral nihilism, the laziness, indolence, his embracing of indolence, and not learning from his past mistakes. Chiefly that when the woman originally betrayed him in his back lore, when he sought to impress her, and she betrayed him, and this ended up putting him into the employ of a foreign government as a spy, this will come back again to haunt him. So he's not happy or a joyous character, but he's also not yet, should we say, totally evil. He's just sort of like hovering in between good and evil. And he's called to the embassy because at a certain point, they're not happy with him. He's not given any actionable intelligence in many years. And he was actually friends with his former handler, the Baron Stratheim von whatever his name was. But that guy has died. And now the foreign embassy in London has gotten a new, younger handler for Mr. Verlock, and he is putting an end to the laziness. He's like, you've been on the dole for 11 years. You haven't given us any good intelligence. So here's what we're going to do. In our country, we have a problem with anarchist Marxist movements. We want you to make something go pop, pop, and it's going to be blamed on your revolutionary group. That will cause England to crack down on anarchist Marxist groups, and it will help us then to justify cracking down on those groups. And so essentially the entire world will crack down on anarcho groups and restrict liberties that allow these groups to fester. And it will all be done through some, he says, magnificent public performance. And his name is Mr. Vladimir. Now, the name obviously is chosen on purpose. The handler, right? The embassy, the operative handler at the embassy, Mr. Vladimir, to suggest, again, something quasi-Russian, something Eurasian. But they're also, again, in league with people whose names don't really make sense, like Baron Stratheim. Let me see what his name is. Actually, it's actually Baron Stadtwartenheim. So, German, Russian, Eurasian. It's all the same. And he says, now, as I understand, Mr. Verlock, the handler, you are in this revolutionary proletariat movement, right? You're a bunch of socialist anarchists that are all sort of colluding together. And he says, what is it you guys do? And he says, well, we don't ever do anything. We basically just sit around talking about how we're going to change society. Wow. Amazing. So the Marxist socialists of 1904 are no different than the Marxist socialists 120 years later who sit around talking about how they're going to revolutionize and change society. And they don't do anything. I'm talking about like the on the street Marxists, right? The actual college student Marxists. And so he said, well, look, I've tried to give you good intelligence. You've not given anything. And I'm tired of paying your putting you on the dole. I'm going to come up with a symbolic public structure that you're going to make go pop pop. And I don't care how you do it. You're just going to do it. Or else we're going to hand you over to the British authorities, or we'll leak your name to the rest of the international communist Marxists in the world, who will then come and unalive you. So this, of course, throws Mr. Verlock into a tizzy. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And so he begins to think about getting the professor first to make the BOMB. So he has this discussion, and they talk about how, hey, you know what? At their next revolutionary meeting, we don't do anything. We never do anything. And it's about time we do something. We got to take action. And this part was one of the best parts in the novel, is the logic behind why they would blow the top off of the specific building. And it's in the handler Vladimir says, we need something that the society sees as a new religion. He says, we're not going to do anything to a church because people are leaving church. What is the fetish of our time? He says, the fetish of our time, the new religion of our time, is science. 1904, science. He says, therefore, we need somebody familiar with bomb science who can attack science. And he says, what better symbol of science than the observatory. So it's basically like this botanist group that meets at this observatory. And he says, let's do an attack on science. And he says that will enrage the public, because who would dare attack something so innocuous, something so positive and helpful? And he says you're going to do it because you will tell your idiot revolutionaries that they're going to bring about year zero. So he actually talks about like a, socialist Jacobin Great Reset. And so they talk about all the different people in the revolutionary circle, how he could try to do it. And so at the next meeting, Verlock says, all right, look, guys, we got to take action. I want to make something go off. And he says, why don't we do something that will bring down society? Now, this is so stupid because, of course, doing this action against an observatory, first of all, that's absurd, right? But secondly, it's not going to bring down society. And I like the fact that Conrad is critiquing even 120 years ago just the outlandish, ineffectual, divorced from reality nature of revolutionary-minded individuals, right? They don't live in reality. None of their idiotic schemes and plots are ever going to do anything. In fact, the irony is that they're too stupid to see that the very actions that they engage in back up the very thing that they want to supposedly oppose. In other words, the state only gains more power by these idiotic actions. Terror actions. So the first spy novel of modern note that is famous was telling us 120 years ago that such actions only aid and empower the state. In fact, Handler Vladimir says, the only reason I want this to occur is so that the liberties of these people will be restricted. Now, the funny thing is that the novel, in perfect projection fashion, which is what you often see British spy fiction doing, basically whatever Spectre is doing is what British intelligence is doing. Likewise, the amorphous foreign agency here, no, it's actually probably the Secret Intelligence Service that might be the ones engaged in supporting the anarchists, you see. And in fact, that's even hinted at a little bit in the novel, because we find out later on that although Verlock is not in the full-time employ of the police, he's also an informant for Inspector Heat. Inspector Heat is the local detective who at times has had to utilize Mr. Verlock for information on various criminals that frequent his Victorian bum shop, and information on the anarchist group, because the local chief of police and Inspector Heat are keeping tabs on the anarchist circle. They're very aware of the future of the proletariat secret society, and so they kind of don't take them very seriously, but they watch them and they wait to see if they're going to actually do anything. Now, we know the setup now, and as the novel progresses, or about chapter 4, it flashes forward. So after the big event, and as you can imagine, poor Mr. Verlock was put in a tough situation. He couldn't do the bomb himself. I suppose he could, but he didn't have the courage to do that. So, and also he's lazy. So he might have just actually been a kind of a ridiculous comedic lazy character, and perhaps he was too lazy to actually just take the BOMB that does eventually get made by the professor. It's disguised as a paint can. I think it's like a big can of like paint or gasoline or something that they're going to go set next to the observatory. And so Mr. Verlock decides, you know what? I do kind of have an extra slow boy sitting around. I've been meaning to get rid of that slow boy because he doesn't really do anything except draw circles and play with sticks, and he gets on my nerves. because he spurgs out and he has these fits and episodes. And so, yes, you got it. Unfortunately, Mr. Verlock chooses the worst possible option. He decides to talk Slow Boy Stevie into planting this thing at the observatory. And he concocts this crazy story that he works with a group that's going to free people, and that the police and bad people have good people locked up in the scientific observatory. And if they make a hole in the wall, they can free all the people that are unfairly imprisoned. Stevie being the slow boy, being the who's that boy on, what was that TV show? I always reference that TV show, right? From the 80s. Who's the slow boy in the 80s TV show? Corky, right? Stevie's the Corky, right? You put a cork in Stevie, he's gonna pop. Pop, pop. Well, in the midst of planning and plotting and actually going to then carry out this operation, Stevie decides that he can do it on his own. And so he grabs the disguised BOMB, starts running across the park, and the BOMB goes off. And it creates a giant hole in the middle of the park. And all of London is in a tizzy, because who in the heck would blow up a slow boy in the middle of a park? So poor Mr. Verlock's entire big operation goes bust. And he doesn't know what to do. Now, the professor, this is actually another one of the comedians. It's a dark comedy. It gets set there. The professor believes that he is going to finally get his vengeance on society. And so he's all celebrating. But the professor doesn't even know that his whole plot also was a failure. He just hears that something blew up and he thinks that it was a success. He thinks, ha ha ha, my operation succeeded. And it turns out, no, it actually was a giant failure. So, key element here for reality for us is, guess what happens in real operations like this? Oh, slow boy, stupid patsies. Yes. In fact, if we remember when we did the Global Elite book series, we did Miles Copeland's Game of Nations. And what did Miles Copeland say in that chapter about TERROR people? He said these are some of the dumbest people on the planet. He says we love TERROR people. He says because they're so stupid, we have a stable of them. We can roll out some idiot TERROR dupe patsy anytime we need them. Are you beginning to see how these giant TERROR operations actually run? Now, in the history of the world, I'm sure there are some homegrown randos and actual organic events. But I would venture to say that most of the big scale global T events that we've heard about are actual events not planned and plotted by random low-level randos. They are, in fact, engineered by governments, foreign governments, and perhaps even private corporate entities. In fact, I did a talk, on the 4th hour a couple years ago, and we went through 42 or 48 admitted by governments, admitted fake flag events in the last 120 years. So, going back to the time of this novel, since the time of this novel, there have been at least 40 to 50 admitted fake flag T events. Now, I want to say that was an article that was on Zero. I mean, it was on something else, but I think it was linked on Zero Hedge. Let's see if it probably doesn't even come up anymore. let's see. It's like maybe 42, 45, if I can find that article. Let me try zero hedge, see if that works. Here it is. Yeah, 42. This is it. Oh, now it's behind a paywall? Come on, dude. Give me a break. Oh, that's behind a paywall, too. All right, so it's 42. Let's try that. Now, this isn't all of them. This is just ones that are in this article. There's more than this. Okay, yeah, here's the original from Washington's blog. This is it. And I will link this for you guys right here if you want to read this. So this is a well-known thing, and you can go look up each of these if you want. I did a whole 4th hour on this a while back. Now, guess what else is interesting in regard to this novel? Everyone's heard of the Reichstag event, right? And this is believed to be one of these fake flag events, famously. And do you guys remember who they used? Marius van der Lubbe, supposedly. Is that his name? I think that's right. Marinus van der Lubbe. Yep. And he's even got a slow boy face. So now the fake flag narrative of this event is that the Reichstag was set on fire by the tiny mustache men followers, who then blamed it on the communists. But the person that they supposedly utilized as the patsy was a slow boy by the name of Marinus van der Lubbe. So yes, I know all you dirty-minded people interject all your lube jokes. I know. Yeah. His name is Lube. I know. I already know how you think. I know. Now, who is the patsy in this novel in 1904? Ah, a slow boy. Now, this event was 1934. Is that right? Supposedly 33, excuse me. So, February 27, 1933, van der Lubbe is arrested and said to be behind the setting ablaze to protest fascist rule. But supposedly he was a slow boy, right? Historians debate exactly whether he worked alone or whether he had other people with him or whatever. But the tiny mustache man said, oh, he's part of the Communist Youth Bund. So, what do you know? It's almost like this. That story reads like Joseph Conrad, doesn't it? Interesting. What do you guys think? Now, to get to the professor, I want to talk about the professor because one of the things I appreciated again about this gaggle of anarcho-Marxists is that Conrad explicitly, many, many times over in the novel, portrays the anarchists and the anarcho-Marxist people here as religious fanatics. In fact, he consistently uses religious terminology every time he's describing and profiling the individuals involved in the anarchist secret society. The professor, he says, is an ascetic. He was an ascetic in terms of purity of thought, power, prestige, and wealth eluded him, and so as a mark of rebellion against his father, who was a preacher, so he comes from a rigid Christian sect, he rebelled against this father by creating a frenzied puritanism of ambition. And so if he was not going to be wealthy, which is what he immediately wanted, leaving his Christianity as a young man, that failed. And so now he was going to obtain a name and fame through the BOMB plot. He would, in fact, destroy faith in morality itself and in legality itself through this big event. So he's going to be like Raskolnikov thinks in Crime and Punishment, right? When he hears the story of the great men, which inspires him to commit the murder, right? Raskolnikov's like, I want to be a great man of history, right? So the professor, I'm going to be a great man of history. Well, if I can't be rich and do it that way, I'm going to do it through being a famous, I'm going to be the next Jeffrey Badonkadonk, right? He wants to be the Jeffrey Badonkadonk of his day. And every time the Marxists and the anarcho-Marxist socialists are described, they're described with this sort of religious imagery and terminology. It is spoken of as providence, predestined, and so forth. So they have this religious faith in their revolution that it will come to be in almost an eschatological way. So if you don't want to read the novel, you can watch the British series. It's pretty close to the novel. I'm going to save the end of both the movie and the novel for subscribers. This is the first half of the book. We're almost right to the middle of it. And the only critique I would have is that Toby Jones doesn't come off like the character in the book is like this big, burly, sort of lazy, like teddy bear man. And Toby Jones is like, 4 feet tall, like a little like Hyrax or something. He's like a little Hyrax man. You know what I mean? So, but he's a great British actor, so he's great for the role. He just doesn't look like the description of the guy in the novel. So this is the professor, perfectly cast, is exactly like what you would think some insane anarcho-Marxist professor would look like. And this is a scene where he shows to the Chief Inspector Heat that he's Charles Baumstrap at all times, literally, right? Now, another thing I want to mention, which is that there's a great critique not just of the idiocy of the anarcho-Marxists, but Conrad does very well in this novel of critiquing really all layers of society. And I wouldn't even say that it's even a critique necessarily of the upper class, because really the only people in this whole novel who actually know what's going on and who are sort of detached and removed from all the drama are the upper class. And I'm including in the upper class the prominent noble lady, who we'll find out later on supports one of the anarchists, Ambassador Handler Vladimir, Sir Ethelred, and then we could include the chief commissioner. He's sort of like the upper middle class, right? So we've got the upper class of those people who really are kind of set apart. And then we've got the middle class operatives and people who are Inspector Heat, Mr. Verlock, Winnie, and I can't read my notes there. Winnie being the wife. And then we have the lower class being the mom, the Beatus mom who's going crazy, Slow Boy Stevie, because they end up Stevie ends up, I think, in a poorhouse, and the mom ends up in a charity asylum. And then you have some of the sort of random anarchists. And the novel doesn't really tell you anything other than that everybody below that upper class is essentially manipulated. Because none of these middle class people have any conception of the way that the ruling class is looking at society and gauging it and steering it, right? The concern of the upper class, particularly Sir Ethelred, who is the Secretary of State, Ambassador Vladimir, and Lady What's-Her-Face, who's the patron of Michaelis, the anarchist. They're only really concerned with their class and ruling, and it's just, there's a divide. There's really no connection between these groups. And no one in the middle class has any clue what's going on. And this makes it even more difficult for Verlock as a character. Because what can he do? He really has no way out. And this is why he's a tragic character. He can't go to anyone in the upper class. They don't care. I mean, what's he going to do? Go tell the Secretary of State that he's been spying for a foreign government? I mean, he'll go to jail or be killed. He can't... go to, his handler, because his handler controls him. So there's really nowhere he can go, nothing he can do. He's really forced to, he's at the sway of those way more powerful than him. And he can't explain this to anybody in his social strata or his class, because they have no idea about how to govern society, and they have no idea what fake flag events are. I mean, nobody today knows what a fake flag, I mean, like 95% of the population still doesn't know what that is. Like, of course, middle class people in 1904 are not going to know, middle to lower class, right? And of course, in the novel, the what we're calling the lower class, right? The mentally unstable mom, the slow boy, and then the gaggle of random poverty-stricken anarchists, they're completely manipulated and idiotic too. So we have a kind of a realistic portrayal of how society actually works, and how you can't really expect people to get it. I think this is something that we all have to kind of grapple with and deal with as we mature and as we learn about the world and how it really works. Like, eventually we realize, like, you know what? Grandma's not going to understand fake flag events. And that's okay. Like, Grandma doesn't have to understand fake flag events. Grandma doesn't have to understand composite hypostasis. You know, like, they don't have to get... It just doesn't make sense to expect that everybody in society can figure it all out. And that's really a modern notion anyway. This expectation of what the enlightened... This is like an Enlightenment idea. Oh, the enlightened citizen who can plow a field and can write a book about poetry, and can also read and discuss civic matters at the local town hall with the foreign dignitaries. That doesn't exist, man. People are mechanics, and they watch football, and they get their paycheck. Right. And they're soccer moms, and they have time for kids, and that's it. So you can't expect these absurd Enlightenment expectations. And although I don't know that we necessarily want to go back to some sort of Victorian era situation, that doesn't seem very cool. But at least they had this sort of understanding that not everybody in society is fit to do everything. Not everybody in society can do everything. It's an absurd society where everybody can and should do everything. It's preposterous. And ironically, that's the attitude of the anarcho-revolutionaries in the novel. They actually think they're going to completely destroy the entire power structure, the class system, when in the novel itself, it's telling you that, like, the middle class is never going to understand and think and deal with the realities that the upper class has to deal with. Because although we might not like the idea of foreign governments sending spies and agent provocateurs, that's essentially what Verlock is an agent provocateur. We might not like that, but that's the reality of the world. The world that we live in has fake flag events. It has mass media deception. It has agent provocateurs. It has revolutionary movements in the pay of corporate elites, Soros, whatever. That's the reality of this world. And you're never going to get the mechanic to figure out and understand all that. I mean, I think for me, as a person who, when I was younger and very idealistic, I thought, oh, it's my job to wake everyone up. I will wake everyone up to what Oswald Spengler talks about. Dude, nobody's going to read Oswald Spengler. Like 1% of the audience will read that. And it was actually kind of a burden lifted once I realized eventually, you know what? Not everybody has to figure this stuff out. They won't. It's okay. Like, it's a bizarre expectation that what? Like everybody's going to read hundreds of books? They don't have time for that. And I think at least, again, we don't necessarily want to go back to Victorian era, but they at least understood that not everybody's made for and able and capable of doing all these things. And that's okay. We even have, though, in his portrayal of the upper class, however, the contradictions and the absurdities of the noble lady. I forget her name. She may not even be named. They may just call her the lady, but she believes in the anarchism. So even amongst the upper class, and perhaps Conrad is doing that on purpose to tell us of the absurdities and the contradictions and the stupidity of the upper class in his day, even to believe in anarchism. Why would you believe in this thing that wants to overthrow you? It's stupid. Now, it's not that the lady in the novel is like super manipulative, and no, she actually is naive, right? So the upper class can be naive, the noble lady. She has a lot of money, we learn, and so part of the reason this anarchist group, in this case, the character Michaelis, who's writing this great book, right? So Michaelis believes that he's going to write this great book. His patron is the noble lady. She's bought him this cottage, and she's funding his book. She's going to have it published. And it's all absurd. They make fun of it throughout the novel because they know the book's going to flop. But he's convinced this noble lady that his anarchism is the answer to society's ills. Because she's a simple, emotionally... she's a being who moves and operates on the basis of emotion, Conrad says. But when it comes to Sir Ethelred or Ambassador Vladimir, no, these are 100% geopolitical manipulative operatives, particularly Ambassador Vladimir, right? He has no scruples and perfectly understands the game, the rules of the game, as Inspector Heat calls it, which is odd because Inspector Heat believes, as a middle-class man, right, as the detective and inspector, that it's his duty to follow all the rules. And the irony, of course, is that the upper class, they don't follow any rules. There's no rules upon Ambassador Vladimir, right? Because he's arranging a giant TERROR event. And it's precisely that above the rules mindset of that upper class that Inspector Heat will never grasp or understand. Which, ironically, the professor, although he's kind of an idiot, and he's kind of a utopian, chaotic, evil madman, he's actually a little closer to the mindset of the elite and Ambassador Vladimir than anyone else in the novel. So that's the irony here. It's rather, of course, that Ambassador Vladimir is a much more cultured, efficient, charismatic, witty, successful individual, and is able to operate according to his rules of the game in a much more successful way and in a much better way, professional way, as opposed to the erratic and sort of manic approach of the professor. But I think the part of the irony of the novel is that the middle class doesn't understand that whether it's Michaelis or whether it's the ambassador supporting and aiding and provoking, getting Verlock to be the provocateur, there would be no anarchism. There would be no any of it if the upper class was not promoting it, allowing it, and supporting it. That's the great irony, right? The professor has the idea that, or no, excuse me, Michaelis. Michaelis is the one that's writing the humanitarian book that will destroy capitalism and destroy industrialism. The world will adopt his utopianism, and the noble lady believes this, because he says that if we annihilate all capital, we will annihilate all class structures and all war. This is how stupid these people are. So naive, right? So Michaelis believes that his revolution is predestined. It is providence. And I think I've covered most of what I wanted to get to in the first half. I did want to mention the crucial page where they actually discuss fake flag tea. I thought it was pretty wild to see this admitted. So this is page 117. You might have saw me posting this on Twitter, but I said, so this is a conversation that's being had between Sir Ethelred, the Secretary of State, and is it the Chief Inspector? Excuse me, it's the Assistant Commissioner of Police speaking to the British Secretary of State. No, Sir Ethelred. In principle, I would lay it down as the existence of secret agents, that they should not be tolerated as tending to augment the positive dangers of the evil against which they are used. The spy will fabricate his information. That the spy will fabricate information is a mere commonplace, but in the sphere of political and revolutionary action, relying partly on violence, the professional spy has every facility to fabricate the very facts themselves, and he will spread the double evil of emulation in one direction, of panic and of hasty legislation, and of unreflecting hate in the other direction. However, this is an imperfect world. So he's pointing out that if this is a state-funded and provoked thing, it will be done by professional operatives and spies who will concoct the entire story and narrative to fit the event. Well, that's exactly what happens when a giant TERROR event happens. And in the very next page, the discussion continues. I mean to say this, first, that there is poor comfort in being able to declare any given act of violence, damaging property or life, that is the work of anarchism at all, but rather something else altogether. It is some species of authorized scoundrelism. What a great term. Authorized scoundrelism. This, I fancy, is much more frequent than we suppose. In other words, fake flag terror events are way more frequent than you suppose. Authorized scoundrelism. Next, it is obvious that the existence of these people in the pay of foreign governments destroys in a measure the efficiency of our supervision. A spy of that sort can afford to be more reckless than the most reckless of conspirators. So he goes on to talk about how he thinks it is a fake flag event, and of course he is correct. The whole thing is engineered by Vladimir, Ambassador Vladimir at the embassy. All right, so like I said, I recommend this if you're interested in a powerful example of predictive programming and fiction that goes pretty deep into topics that most fiction doesn't. I mean, the whole war on tea, all of that. If you don't have time to read the novel, you can go watch the series there. And this is the first half. We will do the rest of this in the second half. Perhaps I'll go back into that the 42 plus examples of fake flags and so forth. It might be a good refresher. It's been 2 or 3 years since we covered that. But they will cover the rest of the novel, the tragedy, the dark satire of this excellent novel. And let's see, we got some super chats. Jacob says for $20. Thank you, Jay. Thank you so much, Jacob. Appreciate that. Steve topping it out tonight with $100 super chat. He says, I missed your live stream yesterday. Congratulations on your success. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, we had that viral show. People kept saying, where is it? How do I watch it? Okay, obviously it's not on YouTube. It's on X. And so if you go over here, I noticed that it was, for whatever reason, freezing up on the phone. So you might have to go click over on a PC or click over here It's working on the computer, but it's right here. I didn't mean to do that. It ended up being 31.9 million views, so 32 million views so far on this Friday episode right there. And then last night was our stream celebrating, and we're still not at 150. And everybody's like, you ain't hit 150. We've always done the party stream right before we hit it. So, yes, I'm aware I can count. I know it's not 150 yet. But I do want to remind you guys that we have the Icon Conference coming up. And if you want the full details, you can read about it here at this link. And it has a link over to the Eventbrite to get your tickets. So that's coming up in, 17 days is our little Icon Conference here in Palm Coast, November 8th. It's a one-day conference with 4 speakers and presentations. Father Theodore, Father Vladimir, FDA, and myself will all be talking about liturgical worship, iconography, history, defense, mystical theology, all of that as part of this excellent fun time Icon Conference. So come check it out if you want to. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's a one-day event, so you don't have to take off of work to, if you can make it down for the weekend or whatever. I think it's a Friday. The November 8th, I think, is a Friday. Anyway. Also, tomorrow is Bohemian... Not tomorrow, what am I saying? This weekend is Bohemian Grove. That link is in the show description as well. So that is going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be comedy. It's going to be podcasts. It's going to be music, karaoke. Last year it was Tripoli, I think, that was sort of headlining it. This time it is a bunch of comedians, and then I'm just arbitrarily classing myself amongst them. Somebody said, it says you're a comedian. Are you a comedian? I was like, no, I'm not actually a comedian. They're like, why does it say it in your bio? I said, that's the joke. Get it? That was a very Norm Macdonald style joke, right? My bio says comedian, and then they say, are you a comedian? I say, no. They said, well, why does your bio say it? I said, that's the joke. Get it? But if I'm making a joke, then you see, it's like next level. Right? But I'm talking to the high IQ audience, because if I do a lit, I can immediately filter out the low IQ audience, right? So, they did finally do the lineup. My day is Saturday. So people are saying, I can't go to this both days. What day is Jay Dyer? My day is Saturday. So if you want to come to this event, there is a ticket. I don't know if it'll be streamed. I have no idea. My day is Saturday, which is, I forget. Oh, that's the comedy day. Right. So whatever day Saturday is, probably I guess that's the 26th. I don't guess it would be Sunday, right? It wouldn't be Saturday. It would be Friday and Saturday, I guess. Bohemian Grove, Summerfield, Florida. It's going to be a lot of fun. There are Saturday-only tickets right there. You see that? You can get a Saturday-only ticket. And be sure and follow me on X, because I'm eager to get to 100K on X. We're not far from 100K. We are creeping up on it. Guys, remember to head over to chalk.com. We got some more super chats. I'll read those in a second. But look, I do have to remind you that we have a wonderful, amazing show sponsor.
Chad Mode is your ultimate natural pre-workout, designed to take your performance to the next level. Chad Mode is for Natty Beast alphas only. Whether you're hitting the gym, invading a favela, conquering a small village, gambling, burning the midnight oil, mogging on your coworkers, or getting banned from Facebook, Chad Mode gives you the competitive edge you need. It's as simple as mixing 1 or 2 scoops of our fine powder into water or juice, providing you with a delicious, energizing beverage featuring a burst of sweet, organic fruit flavor. Chad Mode will give you the extra edge you desperately crave. Chad mode stands out from the crowd by excluding artificial flavors, preservatives, sweeteners, and dyes. We've even avoided so-called natural flavors, ensuring a clean and effective formula. Only soy boys and betas guzzle blue dye and sucralose, further tanking their already low testosterone levels. Chad mode is made in America. Unlike your common TikTok peasant's pre-workout powder, it does not contain Chinese lab-made caffeine and artificial sweeteners that soy boys so often crave. Experience the pure goodness of Chad mode with Blue Magic registered trademark organic blue spirulina extract, organic lemon, cherry, and organic maple crystals. Forget synthetic caffeine. Embrace the natural power of organic green coffee bean extract. Each dose of Chad mode mirrors the caffeine kick of a cup and a half of coffee, delivering a surge of energy alongside essential vitamins, minerals, amino acids, and herbal extracts. Chad mode will allow you to fire your boss and mog on anyone who opposes you. Chad mode will give you a dominant and aggressive edge, like a lion hunting a gazelle, where the gazelle is a TikTok gym zoomer macro guzzling sucralose on the daily, edging to TNF videos. Whether you're seeking a high-potency, junk-free pre-workout or a better way to kickstart your day, Chad mode has you covered. It's not just for men. Chad mode is a solution for anyone ready to conquer their fitness and life goals.
Show off something that we're all proud of. I got a browser here. This is Jay Dyer's much vaunted, much sought after Philosophy 101. Now, he just got this page up. We are just testing it out. You guys are some of the first people in the world to see it. I want to say, for my part, it's not Philosophy 101. I think this is a mistitling. I really think of it as like Philosophy Unleashed, because a Philosophy 101 course, they give you kind of some useless information that you can't make sense of. Jay actually lays out over 12 weeks, dozens and dozens of hours put into just the presentation of this, let alone the hundreds and thousands of hours of research that it takes to have a coherent evolution and history of the origins of philosophy, the uses of philosophy, the different ways to look at it over time, and how that has been brought about to what we have today, which is almost an absence of philosophy on the objective logic and reason side, and an overabundance of woke philosophy that is irrational and is made up day by day as people are like, I think we should bring racism back, and then here's a justification, and then it gets wokeified and spread out, and then all of a sudden you have a bunch of communist, socialist ideas where you become the property in action. You need to be able to stand your own ground. It helps to have a foundation in philosophy because it's a method to find truth. When you get down to it, philosophy is there because you love truth enough to go and learn how to find it because it's valuable.
All right. Thank you guys for sticking with me there. I want to remind you that you can also get signed copies of all the books in the shop at Jay's Analysis. Of course, we do have my 660-page collection of all the things at the website. It's everything except the movie analyses, which obviously are in Esoteric Hollywood 1 and 2. So you can get signed copies of all those at the website shop. The link is in the show description. The link to the philosophy course, the link to chalk.com, all of that is in the show description. Every time I do one of these, I get comments in the YouTube underneath the videos saying, where do I get this? Where do I get your book? Where do I get the part 2? The show description has all of the links, obviously, to everything that we talk about. This is the first half of the novel and the TV show, and in the second half, we'll cover the rest of the novel. That will be available to subscribers to my website. So head on over to jaysanalysis.com and subscribe. In the members section, you get a graduate school education and entertainment for $4.95 a month, $6 a year. You can't beat that. Come on. Jacob says for $20. Thank you, Jay. Thank you so much. Again, Steve, thank you for that big fat super chat. Big Boss, $15. Thank you so much. I always felt cheated in high school when it came to reading. We would start a book, but we never finished it, or we would get a bunch of abridged versions, jam-pack the main literature, and still never read them. I think everybody in high school does that, dude. That's not you, man. That's pretty much everybody, except for like that one chick that's trying to become class president. Dude, she's the only one that read all the books. But when you get older, you enjoy it. You want to decode it and see the hidden meanings and the messages and all the crazy stuff that we do. Monkey Fizzite, $5. When are you and Kai and David doing part 2 of the Monophysite Reputations? The next Sunday. So this upcoming Sunday should be the next one. But thank you for that. Mr. Anderson, $5. Check out The Man Who Was Thursday by G.K. Chesterton. It is about a ring of anarcho tea who all turn out to be members of Scotland Yard. Hey, once again, we got another fake flag tea event. Well, Chesterton was part of that circle of the Wellington House propagandists, so maybe he heard about this kind of stuff there, like Conrad. DC Warwick, $3. Thank you so much. Zal Marxist, $20. Why did Jesus have to be born of a virgin? My Calvinist pastor says because a sin nature is passed on through conception. There's no such thing as a sin nature, because natures are created by God, and nothing that God creates could be evil or could be, quote, sin. Sin doesn't have being, it doesn't have ontology, it doesn't have existence. So the reason he's born of a virgin is to be the new humanity. So he's the new Adam, just like Mary becomes the new Eve. So it's a new humanity, and although Christ willed to be, to assume what's called the blameless passions, being thirsty, being hungry, and so forth, he didn't assume blameful passions, which would be the result of ancestral sin. So it is true that everybody who's a descendant of Adam inherits the propensity to sin, but they don't inherit Adam's actual sin or a sin nature. They inherit the propensity to be a sinner, and that will be essentially all human beings. So that's where the difference lies. Storm the Cat, $10. I noticed there are lots of biblical references in Star Trek Enterprise. For example, the Vulcan prophet Sirach is named after Sirach in the Old Testament. I've never watched Enterprise. Obviously, I have seen old Star Trek episodes. I've seen the movies, and I've seen Star Trek Next Generation. So I was, for whatever reason, in the 1990s, I would come home from basketball practice and from middle school, and I would watch Star Trek Next Generation because it was always on Fox, like every evening at like 5 or something. So for whatever reason, like I just started watching TNG. And TNG, and I think that's because Gene Roddenberry was very interested in literature. So he was a super atheist, supposedly. He's probably more of a Gnostic, Luciferian in reality. But Gene Roddenberry did think highly of Shakespeare and classics of literature. So he would borrow a lot from Bible as literature, right? That kind of stuff. And the TNG plots, a lot of those have Gnostic, neo-Gnostic elements and so forth. We covered that actually in one of the episodes of Hollywood Decoded. But that's why. Alula, $3. You should think about setting up a backup streaming account on Kick. Also, you could do a Kanye West music breakdown stream. Well, all the backups are on Rockfin, you guys. So we have a deal. One of our sponsors, one of our co-partners is Rockfin. Rockfin is the best free speech-based platform out there. I do have stuff on Rumble, but I'm much more, I'm not a huge user of that. We're much more friendly over here to Rockfin. And if you subscribe to Rockfin, there's all the same stuff, but also paid content over here. And the advantage of Rockfin is if you do the paid subscription over there, you get access to not just my paid content and the backups and all that, but you get access to everyone's paid content. So it's a very unique style of, it's kind of like a mix of Patreon and Netflix. So for example, if you pay the subscription, you get access to Jamie's paid content, Eddie Bravo, Tristan, Temple Hat, Burmis, Richard Grove, all of our friends that are over here, over on Rockfin. So that's the advantage of Rockfin. It's a very unique setup, and they also utilize crypto. So if you want to support me, you can subscribe over here on Rockfin, become a member there as well. It's just an alternative to my website, and it's an alternative to over here because, yeah, you never know when this could be shut down. All right. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Very important piece of literature. I'm having fun with the literature streams. They don't get as many views, but I mean, what do you guys think? Isn't this enjoyable? I mean, people should be caring about this, but whatever. as long as I have my high IQ inner core audience here with me, you guys, we can have fun with this. And anyway, I think after this, though, yeah, we'll go back to some more of the open debate streams this week. And next up, we got our occult movie stream. For Spooktober, we're doing SCX bots as a horror. That is a horror. That is a new horror unleashed upon us. We have such sites. We have such. What does Pinhead say? We have such sights to